Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Outside. Today we're going to talk about a watch brand that if you've heard of, you probably don't think much of, or you think it's a fashion watch. And these are watches by Chanel, but I think you're going to find them to be quite surprising. Some of them are exactly that, are fashion watches, but there's more to it than that. I'm wearing my Harry Winston, sort of as an example of a watch that was started by a jewelry company, and but instead of putting in a bunch of cheap movements, they went out and they got some good ones. This one has a movement by Girard-Perregaux and a module for the bi-retrograde by Agenhor. So it's got some really interesting stuff to it. It's the Premier bi-retrograde is the name of the watch. Also, too, speaking of watches, so the other end, this is my project watch. I still have to trim more on the stem to get the crown right next to the case. But it's coming along and it's almost finished. And then I got to get 22 millimeter bands for it. These are 20 millimeters. So once I'm finished with that, it'll be finished. Down the road, not too far, I was going to have a little video on how to do this. And it's sort of like the blind leading the blind, but it was a lot of fun. I think you might enjoy it too. Also, you can save a whole lot of money while you're saving for a really good watch. All right, so let's start off with Chanel. And this is the kind of thing that's a fashion watch about it. Here you have something, this little watch is for women, and it runs on quartz, and it's got a little thing you can open and close, one for just to be a bracelet, and then one to be a little watch with a bracelet. This particular model is called Code Coco for Coco Chanel. Anyway, all right, so let's get down to something that you may be a little more interested in. And this is their model J12. By the way, Chanel's been making watches for about 30 years, which isn't a great deal of time. I mean, it's not like Vacheron and Constantin or even Girard-Perregaux. Or Patek Philippe or Rolex or one of the other ones. But 30 years is more than, let's say, F.P. Journe and some of the newer, really great Kerry Wooten-Lannen. Some of these, I don't think they're quite 30 years old yet. So anyway, you can do a lot of things in a short period of time. The J12 is sort of an interesting one. The first one that I ran across was this... It was the J12 chromatic, and it's 38 millimeter. It runs on a ETA 2892. I don't know if there was much modification to it, but you can pick these up for some pretty good prices. They use a lot of ceramic in the Chanel models, and they're not advertised. They're sort of advertised as unisex because most of the people looking at stuff by Chanel are women. The white one up in the upper right corner, I don't know if you can see it or not, it has diamond indexes between the 12, 6, 9, and 3. And, you know, it's more of a feminine watch, whereas the other ones, they're black and white and sort of guy-looking types of watches, more so. The GMT, I think, even has a rubber strap. Now, of course, the GMT can be used by anybody, same with the chronograph or the chromatic, but they're more of a guy look. Now, one of them that's really interesting is called the J12 3125. And the 2135 is for the caliber number on an Audemars Piguet 3125, caliber 3125. It's a 42 millimeter. Now, this one is quite a bit more expensive. The other J12s along the bottom there, they're between 5,000 or 6,000 and 8,000. This one, though, the J12 3125 is 22,300. Very expensive. But this is the kind of watch that oftentimes falls through the cracks. People say, it's a J12, it's got an ETA in it. But if you find out it's got a 3125, you might be able to pick up a really good deal on this watch. by someone who's not paying attention to the details on that. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you don't even like it. All right, so let's take a look at some Chanel and what they've been up to. Now, first of all, they've won 4 Grand Prix awards, one in 2012, 2013, 2016, and 2017. The one that's the most important, I think, is the one that they won last year. And I think they also have another one up. It's this skeletonized uh, watch they have. I'm not sure what the caliber is on this particular one. I think it's, well, anyway, we'll take a look at that in detail later. But the awards they've won have been for jewelry and ladies' watches, and they're okay. I mean, they are legitimate awards, but they don't care whether you have quartz or what's in them. As long as they're, the major attraction is more style and like diamonds and other kinds of things that are really nice. And so these are 4 that have won. So they're paying attention to that. One in 2017, though, is really special. We'll be coming back to that in a second. Okay, now this next one is from 2011. Now this was really, I think, one that is a watershed. This is a very important watch. The movement design was by Romain Gauthier, and he made all of the parts, and he did the design of the movement essentially. And then the parts were sent to what's called G&F Chatelaine, which is a movement. It's not it's sort of an assembler company owned by Chanel. They own that, I think, since 1993 or so. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. And so this is like, this is a seriously good watch. Romain Gauthier's watches if you can find one, they're like $100,000 and more. They're really very considered to be very fine watches. Anyway, they came up with something called the Caliber 1. That's like, which is, I don't think they spent a lot of time worrying about that. The name. And the watch they came out with is a very, very cool watch, one I happen to like a lot. First of all, the metal they use is called beige gold, and it's a special one that Chanel has some kind of patent on it, or some kind of alloy they use. It's not rose gold, it's not pink gold, it's not red gold, but it's beige, and it's not white gold. And they came up with this. It's got retrograde minutes. It's got 240 degrees. What happens is that the minutes go around and then boom, back after 60 minutes. So once an hour, it does a retrograde on it. This one's got one that does it every minute on a little retrograde. The second thing's on a retrograde. Then it's got small seconds in the middle, and then it has a jumping hour in the middle. Now the way it's set up, it's like a regulator. And anyhow, the hour saute, it's sort of a jumping time, jumping hour. Okay, it's 40 millimeters, and it runs at 3 hertz, which I like. 2100, 2160 vibration per hour. I think I have that wrong. It should be 2600 vibration per hour. Okay, sells for $35,100. Now this is, whoa, that's a lot, especially for a Chanel. But Romain Gauthier designed it and so forth. I mean, designed the movement for it. So on the one hand, it's a lot for any watch, $35,000. But it might be a real interesting way to get your hands on a Romain Gauthier that you couldn't afford otherwise. They'd cost about 3 times that much. Anyway, it's a cool watch. I like it. Now, then they came out with Caliber 2. And Caliber 2 was the one, I think is for the 2017. They won I think it was either ladies or ladies complication in the Grand Prix last year in 2017. And this came out was a caliber 2, and you can, it's great if you, it's a relatively simple movement. And the thing that's important about this is a ladies' watch, and they're very small. And so you get an issue with the whole element of how long you keep the thing wound, and it's got a pretty good wind time on it. All right, so that's caliber 2. Now, they came out with this one called the Boy.Friend, this is a caliber 3. And it looks a lot like, it's called the Boy.Friend skeleton, Boy.Friend, Chanel Boy.Friend skeleton. And the case is, again, in a beige gold and has the onyx, it's called carbochon, and for the darker parts of the movement. And the beveled lines on the case, and this is true from the beginning with Chanel watches, they're from the lines that are in the Chanel number 5 stopper on the cap on it. And they have those, the beveled lines on it. That's where that's from. Okay, now again, this is a woman's watch. But it's an interesting woman's watch. It's extremely interesting. Now, this one goes between 40,000 and 51,000, which is quite expensive. All right, now more on the caliber 3. It is manual winding. It's not a quartz, because a lot of women's watches are quartz. It's got a power reserve of 55 hours. Now, that's a lot. I mean, when you take a look at the size of the barrel on that thing, I don't know how they got 55 hours out of that. I mean, it looks like, I'd be wondering how they got 24 out of it. It runs at 4 hertz rather than 3, which is even more surprising, because with something small like that, you'd want to run it a bit slower so you have a little more time for the charge in it. Anyways, that's 28,800. A variable inertia balance, and then it's got hours and minutes. So it's not complicated in one way, in the sense that it's got a lot of whistles and bells on it, but it's complicated in another, because you first of all, it's totally skeletonized, so you can see everything, and it's relatively simple. The way what Romain Gauthier did was he took, it looks like he took caliber 2 and then lined them up in a vertical, one on top of the other, which is sort of an interesting looking kind of thing. It sort of went down that way rather than the ones that seem to be grouped in the center more. So that's the caliber 3. Okay, in looking at the way in which the this whole thing works with Chanel. So Chanel isn't a bunch of people who think, well, we know perfume, so we know how to make watches. Not that way at all. They're very smart. In 1993, they bought this place called G&F Chatelaine, and they fixed it up. They put in a new facility for needing what you needed in La Chaux de Fonds. And what the G&F Chatelaine had been doing, they've been making parts and cases and so forth, and for watches, and then but they weren't making the parts. So the parts come from, and this really surprised me, they came from Romain Gauthier. He only uses, Gauthier does, he makes like 50 watches a year of his own, with his own brand, but only 30% of his manufacturing goes to making Gauthier watches. Instead, they're doing work for somebody else. Now, in 2011, Chanel bought what they call a friendly share in Romain Gauthier. Probably the same thing more recently that Chanel has done with F.P. Journe. And the way the arrangement works is that Gauthier does the design and produces the movement parts, all of the parts they needed, probably the ébauche, And Senzo's, he's located in Les Sentiers, Switzerland. And he sends them over to G&F Chatelaine in La Chaux-de-Fonds. And they put them together, and out comes the watches you get from the really top ones as well from Chanel. So that's sort of the Chanel story. So anyway, if you're interested, it's sort of an interesting brand, and it's a lot more interesting than most people realize. They have some really fascinating watches, and while most of them are crazy prices, you can find some decent priced ones. The higher ones drop pretty significantly, and the lower ones, like the ETAs and so forth, I don't know if you're interested in those or not, but if you are, you can find some pretty good prices on those as well. Okay, well, this is a different kind of watch company than we usually look at, but it's really an interesting one, and I think the fact that um, uh, the parts are made by Romain Gauthier, and the movements designed and so forth by him, and the way they do things. And also, I was very surprised to find out that Gauthier, he has his, really fairly sophisticated facilities, but he's only, turning out about 50, 60 watches a year of his own. And you always think of somebody like that as, a bunch of, little workshop somewhere on the mountaintop. But not in this case. He was an engineer originally and got his MBA and became a sort of a watch designer, I think, himself, and then made the design and the parts and so forth, and then these other companies use them. All right, well, listen, I'd like to hear what you think about this, your opinions, and get your thoughts on it. This is also an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. And until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Science. Hope to see you on Friday. Bye-bye.